Commander Vz'taar slammed his three-fingered hand onto the lectern, causing the assembled faculty of the Galactic Peace Academy to jolt in their seats. His iridescent scales flared dramatically, a sign of extreme agitation among the Krith species. "They've done it again," he growled, his voice like gravel being crushed. "Those humans," Professor Ayana, a willowy Florian with petal-like appendages, raised one delicate limb. "What exactly have they done this time, Commander?" Vz'taar pulled up a holographic display showing footage of what appeared to be a simple training exercise. The assembled alien educators leaned forward, their various anatomies adjusting to get a better view. This was supposed to be a standard survival challenge. 3 days in the Akaviri wilderness with minimal supplies. Vz'taar paused, his elongated pupils narrowing to slits. The human cadets not only completed the exercise in half the time, but they've established a functioning society, complete with infrastructure, governance, and is that a hot tub? The footage zoomed in on a steaming pool, where several humans reclined, drinking from containers fashioned from local plant life. "How unexpected," drawled Dean Corksall, an ancient praxis with translucent skin revealing a complex neural network beneath. "Who could have possibly foreseen that the creatures from a planet with 90% uninhabitable terrain would excel at survival?" His sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a quantum blade. "That's not the point," Vz'taar hissed. "We're trying to teach discipline, teamwork, endurance, not wilderness resort construction." Assistant Proctor Gwartz, a furry Vexillian with 6 eyes, chittered nervously. "I must point out, Commander, that nothing in the exercise parameters prohibited comfort. The humans simply interpreted the rules differently." "They always interpret the rules differently," Vz'taar muttered. "That's the problem." The room fell silent as the footage continued, showing the human cadets engaging in what appeared to be a primitive sport involving a ball made of woven plants and an impromptu court marked with stones. "I don't understand," said Professor Ayana after a moment. "Why are they expending unnecessary energy when they've already secured survival necessities?" "Recreation," sighed Vz'taar. "Humans require it for psychological well-being. Apparently, mere survival isn't stimulating enough for Deathworlders." Dean Corksall's neural pathways visibly pulsed with increased activity. "Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. Instead of trying to fit humans into our standardized training regimens, we should adapt their natural tendencies toward our goals." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Vz'taar asked suspiciously. "A specialized training track, one that challenges them appropriately." "You mean easier courses?" Gwartz asked, confused. "No," Corksall replied, his voice dropping an octave. "Much harder ones." Cadet Jackson Ford couldn't believe his luck when his name appeared on the list for the Academy's new Enhanced Challenges program. Finally, something that might actually be interesting. The standard curriculum had been mind-numbingly easy so far. Basic survival skills he'd learned as a child, combat simulations that moved at a glacial pace, and worst of all, endless lectures on interspecies diplomacy, where he had to sit still for hours. "Dude, you got picked too?" Cadet Maya Tenzin bounded up to him, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow still managed to look stylish. "This is gonna be awesome." "Yeah, looks like they finally realized humans need something more challenging," Jackson replied, scrolling through the briefing on his datapad. "Says here we're being dropped on Kelvara station for a week-long exercise." "Kelvara?" Maya's eyes widened. "That's the decommissioned mining outpost orbiting a neutron star, right? Extreme radiation, artificial gravity fluctuations, and limited life support. Sweet." "You have a very concerning definition of sweet," said a voice behind them. Cadet Pavel Novak joined them, his square jaw set in a perpetual half-smile. "But I'm in too, along with Ayana Patel and Diego Fuentes." "All the humans?" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "That's not suspicious at all. Maybe they're finally recognizing our superior abilities," Maya suggested with a grin. "Or maybe they're trying to kill us all at once," Pavel countered, though his tone remained light. "Nah," Jackson shook his head. "If they wanted us dead, they'd just make us sit through another 4-hour lecture on Zrillic mating customs." The 3 humans laughed, unaware that they were being observed through hidden surveillance systems by a very interested alien faculty. "Their response is concerning," Professor Ayana noted as she watched the humans' reactions to their assignment. "They seem excited by the prospect of danger." "Typical Deathworlder psychology," Vz'taar explained. Their homeworld constantly tried to kill them for millions of years. It shaped their evolution to seek out and overcome threats rather than avoid them. Fascinating and disturbing in equal measure. Dean Corksall mused. Let's see how they handle Kelvara Station. The environment there would be lethal to most species within hours without proper equipment. We are providing proper equipment, aren't we? Gratz asked anxiously. Vz'taar's scales rippled in what might have been amusement. Of course, basic survival gear. Nothing fancy. And the system failures we've programmed? Corksall inquired. Minor inconveniences, Vz'taar assured him. Nothing a trained cadet couldn't handle with proper application of academy protocols. But humans rarely follow protocols. Ayana pointed out. Exactly, Vz'taar said with a predatory smile. That's the test. The shuttle ride to Kelvara Station was uneventful, which immediately put Jackson on edge. In his experience, when things started easy, they usually went to hell spectacularly later on. Check out the view, Diego Fuentes said, pointing out the viewport at the neutron star. Even at this distance and through the specially filtered glass, the collapsed stellar remnant was an awesome sight, a sphere no larger than a small city, but glowing with intense radiation and surrounded by a halo of superheated particles. Hard to believe something so small can put out so much energy. Ayana Patel remarked, her fingers flying over her datapad as she recorded preliminary observations. Always the scientist of the group. That's what she said. Pavel quipped, earning a chorus of groans and an eye roll from Ayana. Real mature. Novak, she said. But couldn't completely hide her smile. The shuttle docked with a shudder, and the 5 human cadets gathered their gear. As the airlock cycled open, they were greeted by the sterile recycled air of an abandoned space station. Welcome to Kelvara Station, announced a synthetic voice. This facility has been prepared for Galactic Peace Academy training purposes. Your mission parameters have been uploaded to your datapads. Good luck, cadets. That didn't sound ominous at all, Maya muttered as they stepped through the airlock. The interior of the station was dimly lit, emergency lighting casting long shadows along curved corridors. The artificial gravity felt slightly off, about 0.9 Earth standard, giving each step a subtle bounce. According to the brief, Ayana said, consulting her datapad, we need to restart the main reactor, establish life support in all habitable sections, and maintain the station for 7 days while completing various tasks that will be assigned daily. Piece of cake, Diego said confidently, adjusting his pack. I've been studying reactor systems. The one on this station is an older Jervian model, reliable but finicky. I'll take point, Jackson offered, activating his multi-scanner. Maya, watch R6. The rest of you in the middle. Standard formation. They moved through the station efficiently, mapping as they went. Everything was going smoothly, too smoothly, until they reached the main control center. Guys, Diego called from a console he'd been examining. According to these readings, the radiation shielding on the dorsal side of the station is at 40% capacity. That's not great, Pavel said, his usual smile fading. And life support is running on backup power. Ayana added, her fingers dancing across another console. Main reactor is in cold shutdown. We have about 36 hours before air recycling becomes compromised. Check this out, Maya called from a security station. She pulled up camera feeds showing various parts of the station. Several areas were clearly damaged, with exposed wiring and structural breaches sealed by emergency force fields. Looks like this place took some hits. Micrometeoroid impacts. Maybe, Jackson frowned. This doesn't match the briefing. The station was supposed to be decommissioned but intact. Maybe this is part of the test, Diego suggested, making conditions worse than expected. Or maybe, Pavel said slowly, the faculty doesn't actually know what condition the station is in. When was the last time any of them visited a human lethal environment? The 5 cadets exchanged looks. Well, Jackson said finally, a slow grin spreading across his face. I guess we'll have to show them how humans handle unexpected challenges. First things first, Ayana said practically. We need to stabilize life support and improve those radiation shields. Or this exercise will be very short, and very final. Maya added with a grimace. Diego, you and Ayana get to the reactor. Pavel and I will check the radiation shielding. Maya, stay here and coordinate. Keep mapping the station systems, Jackson ordered. Standard communication protocols. Check in every 15 minutes. As they split up to tackle their assignments, none of them noticed the small observation drone hovering in a corner of the ceiling, transmitting everything back to the academy faculty. They're splitting up, Gratz chittered anxiously. That's not in the standard emergency protocols. Actually, it makes perfect tactical sense, Vz'taar grudgingly admitted. They're addressing multiple critical systems simultaneously. But the radiation levels in Section 12 where the shielding is weakest, it's nearly twice what we intended. Professor Yelani noted with concern, perhaps we should abort. No, Dean Kordzal interrupted. This is precisely the type of challenge we need to observe them handling. The radiation levels are elevated, but not immediately lethal to humans. Their species has remarkable radiation resistance compared to most galactic citizens. They seem to be thriving on the pressure, Vz'taar observed as they watched Diego and Ayana working with remarkable efficiency to bring the reactor online. On another screen, Jackson and Pavel were improvising repairs to the radiation shielding using materials from their packs combined with salvage station components. Look at their vital signs. Yelani pointed to the biotelemetry data streaming alongside the video feeds. Elevated heart rates, increased adrenaline production, but stress indicators are within optimal ranges. They're enjoying this. Deathworlders, Vz'taar said, as if the single word explained everything. In the control room, Maya had established an impromptu command center, coordinating the teams and compiling a comprehensive station status report that went far beyond what had been requested in their mission parameters. Fascinating, Kordzal murmured. They're not just completing the assigned task, they're rebuilding and improving the station systems. Should we introduce the planned system failures? Grades asked. Vz'taar's scales flickered with amusement. I think our human cadets have enough real challenges to deal with. Let's see how they handle these before we add more. 6 hours later, Jackson wiped sweat from his brow as he finished welding the final patch onto the makeshift radiation shield. Pavel held the improvised reflective panel in place, his muscles straining. That should hold, Jackson said, inspecting their work. Not pretty, but functional. Like my ex-girlfriend, Pavel quipped. Jackson rolled his eyes. Let's get back to control. Maya's probably going crazy being stuck there while we have all the fun. Their comms crackled to life. I heard that Ford, Maya's voice came through. And for your information, I've mapped the entire station's systems, identified 3 critical failures you haven't found yet, and fixed the coffee machine. You fixed the coffee machine? Pavel perked up immediately. You're a goddess among mortals, Tenzin. I know, she replied smugly. Diego and Ayana have the reactor at 60% power and rising. Life support is stabilizing. Get your butts back here for a status meeting and caffeine. As they made their way back through the station corridors, Jackson couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This was what humans were born for, taking impossible situations and turning them around through sheer stubborn ingenuity. When they reached the control room, they found Diego and Ayana already there, looking tired but satisfied. Reactor's humming like a content cat, Diego reported. Had to manually realign the containment fields, but it's solid now. Environmental systems are responding well to the increased power, Ayana added. Oxygen levels are normalizing throughout the accessible sections. Great work, team, Jackson said, accepting a cup of surprisingly decent coffee from Maya. What's next on our crisis list? Maya brought up a holographic display of the station. 3 main issues. The communications array is completely fried. There's a coolant leak in the lower engineering section. And most concerning, the orbital stabilizers are operating at minimal capacity. Meaning, Pavel prompted. Meaning this station is gradually being pulled closer to the neutron star. Ayana explained gravely. We have about 4 days before radiation levels become problematic even with our repairs. And about 6 days before structural integrity becomes compromised. A heavy silence fell over the group. So Jackson said finally. Just to be clear, we're stranded on a failing space station that's slowly spiraling toward a collapsed star that will tear us apart atom by atom, with no way to call for help. That's about the size of it, Maya confirmed. Diego looked around at his fellow cadets and grinned. Best training exercise ever. The humans burst into laughter, a reaction that caused the watching alien faculty to exchange bewildered glances. Now, Jackson said, setting down his empty coffee cup, let's figure out how to fix this mess. Because I don't know about you all, but I'm not letting some faculty training exercise get the better of me. Agreed, Ayana said firmly. I say we start with the communications array. If we can get a message to the academy, they'll just say it's part of the test, and we need to solve it ourselves. Maya interrupted. Fair point, Jackson nodded. So we prioritize the orbital stabilizers, then the coolant leak, then communications as a backup plan. I have an idea for the stabilizers, Diego said, excitement building in his voice. We can't fix the main thrusters with what we have, but if we vent atmosphere from specific points around the station in a coordinated sequence, we create makeshift directional thrusters. Ayana finished his thought, her eyes lighting up. Diego, that's brilliant. It'll mean reducing our air reserves, Pavel pointed out. Risky. We can compensate by sealing off non-essential sections, Maya suggested. Concentrate life support to our core operational areas. It could work, Jackson said thoughtfully. Ayana, Diego, start calculating the precise venting sequence we'd need. Maya, identify which sections we can afford to seal off. Pavel, you and I will deal with that coolant leak before it becomes a bigger problem. As the humans dove into their tasks with renewed energy, the observing alien faculty watched in stunned silence. They're not panicking, Great said in disbelief. Of course not, Vz'taar replied, though his tone carried a note of grudging respect. They're humans. This is what they do. This is unprecedented. Dean Kortsal muttered, neural pathways flashing rapidly beneath his translucent skin. The station's condition is far worse than our initial assessment indicated. Should we extract them? Professor Yelani asked, her pedal appendages quivering with concern. Absolutely not, Commander Vz'taar said firmly. The situation is dangerous but not yet lethal. This is precisely the type of challenge that will demonstrate whether humans are truly suited for the most demanding roles in the Galactic Peace Force. But the orbital decay Greats began is a legitimate problem they must solve, Vz'taar interrupted. However, we will maintain the extraction shuttle on standby. If radiation levels reach critical thresholds, or structural integrity falls below 20%, we intervene. Not before. The faculty members watched as Pavel and Jackson navigated the narrow maintenance tunnels of the lower engineering section, their helmet lights cutting through clouds of escaping coolant. There's the rupture, Jackson said, pointing to a hairline crack in a primary coolant conduit. Glowing blue fluid hissed out in a fine mist. Environmental seals in our suits will hold for about 30 minutes in this concentration. Then we'd better work fast, Pavel replied, already pulling repair materials from his pack. Hold the patch in place while I seal it. On another screen, Diego and Ayana were deep in calculations, holographic models of the station spinning before them as they plotted optimal venting points. If we coordinate the vents in sequence, Diego explained, we can create enough thrust to correct our orbit without destabilizing the station structure. We'll need to time it perfectly. Ayana added, the neutron star's gravity well isn't uniform due to its rotation. We'll have to vent in pulses synchronized with its period. In the control center, Maya was systematically rerouting power and life support, creating a sustainable habitat within the station's most defensible sections. Their approach is unconventional, Professor Yelani noted, but effective, Dean Kortsal countered. They're demonstrating remarkable problem-solving abilities under extreme pressure, and they're still making jokes. Greats observed with bewilderment, as they watched Pavel and Jackson exchanging banter while working with hazardous materials. I don't understand how they can find humor in this situation. It's a psychological coping mechanism, Vz'taar explained. Humans use humor to reduce stress and build group cohesion during crises, another evolutionary adaptation from their Deathworld. Fascinating, Kortsal murmured. Perhaps we should incorporate more of these psychological elements into our standard curriculum. By the 36-hour mark, the human cadets had stabilized the station's most critical systems. The coolant leak was repaired, life support was functioning efficiently in their designated zones, and they had even managed to boost the radiation shielding to 68% capacity. Status report, Jackson called out as they gathered for their regular meeting in the makeshift command center. Orbital stabilizers are prepped for our venting sequence, Diego reported. We can initiate in the next 4 hours, when the neutron star's rotation brings it to the optimal position. Environmental systems are holding steady, Ayana added. I've rigged the atmospheric recyclers to operate at 115% efficiency. Not sustainable long-term, but it will compensate for what we'll lose during venting. I've sealed off sections A through F and K through M, Maya said. Highlighting areas on the station schematic gives us about 40% of the station to work with, but concentrates resources where we need them. Radiation levels, Jackson asked. Higher than I'd like, but within tolerable parameters, Ayana responded. Our modified shielding is holding. We're getting about the same exposure as a long-haul lunar shuttle pilot would in a month, so we'll all be slightly radioactive when we get home. Cool. I always wanted to glow in the dark, Pavel quipped. What about communications? Jackson pressed. Still dead, Maya grimaced. The array took a direct hit from what looks like a micrometeoroid cluster. I might be able to rig something with parts from our emergency beacons, but range would be limited to within this system. Not much good since nobody's in this system except us, and a really angry neutron star, Diego pointed out. Keep it as a backup plan, Jackson decided. For now, let's focus on the orbital correction. Once we're stable, we can reassess. There's something else, Ayana said hesitantly. I've been analyzing the pattern of damage to the station. The failures aren't random. They're too coordinated. A thoughtful silence fell over the group. You think someone deliberately sabotaged the station? Pavel asked, his usual levity absent. Not necessarily sabotage, Ayana clarified. But the systems that failed are precisely the ones we'd need to deal with in a survival situation. The pattern is too perfect to be coincidental. So this really is all part of the test, Diego said slowly, but much more extreme than they told us. Either that, Jackson added grimly, or someone at the Academy seriously underestimated the station's deterioration. Either way, Maya concluded. We're on our own, until the scheduled extraction in 6 days, unless we impress them enough to pull us out early. Pavel suggested hopefully. Jackson snorted. Have you met Commander Vz'taar? He'd leave us here an extra week if he thought it would build character. Then we stick to the plan, Ayana said firmly. Fix what we can, survive, and show them exactly what humans are capable of. In the Academy observation room, Commander Vz'taar's scales rippled with what might have been embarrassment. They've deduced that the situation was engineered, he admitted. Impressive pattern recognition. Dean Kortzel noted, especially considering they're simultaneously managing multiple survival crises. What concerns me more, Professor Yelani interjected, is their suggestion that we might have miscalculated the station's condition. The faculty exchanged uncomfortable glances. The preliminary survey was conducted by automated probes, Gret said defensively. They're generally reliable for standard environments. Kelvara station is hardly standard, Vz'taar pointed out. The neutron star's radiation interferes with most scanning technology. The question becomes, Kortzel said thoughtfully, did we inadvertently place our human cadets in genuine peril, rather than simulated danger? The line between genuine and simulated danger is precisely what we're testing, Vz'taar countered. However, I suggest we increase monitoring frequency and maintain the extraction team at heightened readiness. 4 hours later, the human cadets implemented their orbital correction plan. Jackson and Pavel positioned themselves at manual override stations on opposite sides of the station, ready to close emergency bulkheads if the controlled venting breached any weakened sections. Beginning venting sequence in 3, 2, 1 mark. Diego called out. Throughout the station, precisely calculated sections of atmosphere vented into space in a carefully orchestrated pattern. The station shuddered as the makeshift thrusters pushed against the inexorable pull of the neutron star. Orbital trajectory shifting, Ayana reported, eyes fixed on the navigational displays. 0.3 degrees and holding steady. We need at least 2 full degrees to achieve stable orbit. Continuing venting sequence, Diego confirmed. Second pulse in 10 seconds. Structural stress on section H7 approaching tolerance limits, Maya warned. We may have a breach developing. I see it, Pavel responded from his position, ready to seal if it goes. The station groaned as the second venting pulse fired, metal joints and welds protesting against forces they were never designed to withstand. 1.2 degrees correction, Ayana announced. We're making progress. Warning indicators on coolant pressure, Jackson reported. Our patch is holding, but the primary system is straining. Final venting sequence initiating, Diego called. This is the big one, people. Brace for turbulence. The station lurched violently as the most powerful series of vents fired simultaneously. Warning alarms blared throughout the habitable sections. Hull breach in section H7, Pavel shouted over the commotion. Sealing emergency bulkheads now. Atmosphere loss at acceptable levels, Maya confirmed. Containment holding in all critical areas. For several tense moments, the station continued to shudder and creak. Then gradually, the violence subsided. Orbital trajectory stabilized, Ayana announced, a note of triumph in her voice. We've achieved a sustainable orbit with current power levels. We'll need to make smaller corrections every 12 hours. But we're no longer in immediate danger of spiraling into the neutron star. A ragged cheer went up from the human cadets. Great work, everyone, Jackson said, making his way back to the command center. We've bought ourselves time and options. Now let's see about getting communications back online. The alien faculty watched the humans celebrate their success with a mixture of amazement and growing respect. They actually did it. Grades chittered in disbelief. An orbital correction using nothing but controlled atmospheric venting. The mathematics involved in calculating those venting sequences. Professor Yelani marveled. It would challenge our senior engineering students. And they executed it under extreme pressure with minimal resources. Vz'taar added, his tone reluctantly impressed. Even I wouldn't have considered such an approach. Perhaps this is why humans have risen so quickly in galactic society despite their brief time among us. Dean Kortsol suggested. They don't simply adapt to challenges, they thrive on finding innovative solutions to problems that would paralyze other species with fear. The question becomes, Vz'taar said thoughtfully, how do we harness this ability without allowing it to destabilize established protocols? Maybe the protocols need destabilizing, Kortsol replied, causing the other faculty members to stare at him in shock. What? I'm merely suggesting that adaptability might be as valuable as adherence to procedure in certain circumstances. Let's continue observation, Vz'taar said after a moment. I'm curious to see what they'll attempt next. Over the next 3 days, the human cadets settled into a surprisingly comfortable routine aboard the damaged station. They worked in shifts to maintain essential systems, make ongoing repairs, and even improve their living conditions. Ayana had converted an unused storage compartment into a makeshift hydroponics bay, growing nutrient-rich algae to supplement their ration packs. Diego had rebuilt the water recycling system to operate at nearly peak efficiency. Pavel had discovered a cache of entertainment modules in a sealed locker and set up movie nights to maintain morale. Jackson and Maya, meanwhile, had been working tirelessly to restore communications. I think we've got it, Maya announced on the 4th day, connecting the final circuits in their jury-rigged communications array. It won't reach the Academy directly, but I've recalibrated it to send a focused beam toward the nearest relay station in the Tellarian system. Range? Jackson asked. About 70% chance of reaching the relay. Whether anyone's monitoring that frequency is another question. Better than nothing, Jackson decided. Send the status update and our coordinates. Standard encryption. As Maya prepared the transmission, Jackson called the team together. We've done good work here, he told them. We've stabilized the station, established sustainable life support, and now we're restoring communications. But I want to be clear, we're not just surviving this challenge. We're going to use the remaining time to leave this station better than we found it. What exactly did you have in mind? Ayana asked. Jackson grinned. I think this rust bucket would make an excellent forward research post for the Academy. With a few more repairs and some creative requisitioning when we get back, we could turn Kelvara Station into a permanent human training facility. You want us to claim this death trap for humanity? Pavel laughed. I'm in. Think about it, Diego added excitedly. A dedicated station for Deathworld training scenarios. We could run exercises that would be unthinkably dangerous for most species, and study the neutron star up close. Ayana said, warming to the idea. The scientific possibilities are tremendous. Plus, Maya added with a mischievous smile, imagine Vz'taar's face when we submit the proposal. Unknown to the cadets, Commander Vz'taar's expression at that very moment would have satisfied Maya immensely. His scales had flattened against his skull in a creative expression of utter disbelief. They want to keep the station, he sputtered, as a permanent facility. It's actually quite logical, Dean Kortsal observed. The environment is ideal for human training purposes precisely because it would be lethal to most other species. The Academy budget could never support such a specialized facility. Grutz protested. I wouldn't be so certain, Professor Yalani countered. The diplomatic corps has been pushing for more human inclusion in hazardous assignments. They might provide funding if we present it as specialized training for such roles. Vz'taar's tail lashed in agitation. Are we seriously considering this idea? We should at least hear their full proposal, Kortsal replied diplomatically. After all, they've demonstrated extraordinary capabilities during this exercise. On the 5th day, as the human cadets were finalizing their station improvement plans, Maya's cobbled-together communications array picked up a transmission. Incoming message, she announced, her fingers dancing across the control panel. It's from the Academy extraction team. They're asking for our status. Tell them we're operational and proceeding with the exercise as planned, Jackson instructed. No need for early extraction. Maya raised an eyebrow. You sure? We could get out of here a day early and miss the chance to finish our improvements. No way, Jackson grinned. Besides, I want to see their faces when they dock and find out what we've accomplished. The next day, as the extraction shuttle approached Kelvara station, the 5 human cadets stood proudly in the main airlock, tired but triumphant. They had not only survived the dangerous environment but had transformed significant portions of the station into a functional facility. As the airlock cycled open, they were greeted by the shocked expressions of the extraction team, a mix of Academy security personnel and medical staff, clearly prepared for a rescue operation rather than a welcoming committee. Cadets, the lead officer, a reptilian Vexon, said hesitantly, we anticipated you might require medical assistance. Nothing a hot shower won't fix, Pavel replied cheerfully, though Cadet Ford might need his head examined for volunteering us to stay an extra day. We've prepared a full report on the station's condition and our repair efforts, along with a proposal for converting Kelvara into a permanent human training facility. The extraction team exchanged bewildered glances. That's not standard procedure, the officer managed. Yeah, we get that a lot, Jackson said with a grin. You might want to prepare Commander Vz'taar for our debriefing. It's going to be interesting. The debriefing chamber at the Galactic Peace Academy fell into stunned silence as the human cadets completed their presentation. The detailed station schematics, repair logs and proposed renovations floated in holographic display above the central table. Commander Vz'taar had remained uncharacteristically quiet throughout, his scales shifting through various colors that betrayed his conflicting emotions. Finally, he rose to address the cadets. In my 300 cycles as an instructor at this academy, he began slowly, I have never witnessed such a creative response to a training exercise. The humans exchanged glances, unsure if this was praise or criticism. Your methods were unorthodox, your disregard for standard protocols concerning, and your proposal to establish a permanent facility bordering on presumptuous. Vz'taar paused, his elongated pupils fixed on Jackson. And yet I cannot deny the effectiveness of your results. Dean Kortsal's neural pathways pulsed with increased activity. The Academy Administrative Council has reviewed your proposal for Kelvara Station. While we have concerns about resource allocation and oversight, we are tentatively approving a pilot program. The human cadets broke into wide grins. There will be conditions, Vz'taar added quickly. Strict safety protocols, regular inspections and joint oversight with non-human faculty. This will not be a human-exclusive facility. Understood, Commander, Jackson replied diplomatically. We welcome the opportunity to demonstrate how these techniques can benefit cadets of all species. That remains to be seen, Vz'taar said dryly. Nevertheless, your performance during this exercise has been noted. All 5 of you will receive commendations in your permanent records. As the cadets filed out of the debriefing room, Professor Yalani approached Vz'taar. You were unusually lenient with them, she observed. Vz'taar's scales rippled with resignation. What would you have me do? Reprimand them for exceeding expectations, for turning a survival challenge into an opportunity for expansion, for demonstrating exactly the kind of initiative we claim to value in theory, but punish in practice. So you're becoming a supporter of human methods now? She asked, surprised. Hardly, Vz'taar snorted. But I am a realist. Humans are not going to adapt to our traditional methods. We've seen that repeatedly. Perhaps it's time we adapted to accommodate their unique abilities. A dangerous precedent, Corksall noted, joining the conversation. Perhaps Vz'taar conceded. But consider the alternative. Do we want these Deathworlders working with us, bringing their unique perspectives to our challenges, or do we want them growing frustrated and seeking opportunities elsewhere? The faculty members fell silent, contemplating the implications. 6 months later, Kelvara Station, now officially designated Academy Extreme Environment Training Facility, received its first class of cadets. While primarily designed for human trainees, a small but growing number of non-human cadets had volunteered for the program, eager to test themselves against challenges normally considered beyond their physiological capabilities. Commander Vz'taar, surprisingly, had requested assignment as liaison officer, dividing his time between the academy and the station. He stood now in the observation deck, watching as Jackson Ford, recently promoted to junior instructor, led a mixed group of human and non-human cadets through emergency response drills. I still don't understand them, Vz'taar admitted to Dean Corksall, who had accompanied him on this inspection visit. Even after all this time, understanding may not be necessary, Corksall replied philosophically. Perhaps appreciation is sufficient. Below them, a Florian cadet, a member of Professor Yelani's typically fragile species, successfully completed a simulated hull breach repair alongside her human teammates. The humans celebrated her accomplishment with their typical enthusiastic physicality, careful, modified high fives, adapted to her delicate appendages. They're teaching the others to think like Deathworlders, Vz'taar observed. Not exactly, Corksall corrected. They're teaching them to overcome their instinctive limitations, to see challenges as opportunities rather than threats. A dangerous lesson, Vz'taar murmured. Perhaps, Corksall acknowledged, but possibly a necessary one. The galaxy is changing, Commander. New threats emerge that traditional approaches cannot address. Perhaps what we need most are individuals who see impossible situations and think, how fascinating. Let's fix this. Vz'taar watched as Jackson demonstrated an unconventional repair technique to the mixed group of cadets, his animated explanation drawing laughter and interest in equal measure. You may be right, he admitted reluctantly. Though I'll never tell them that. Their egos are insufferable enough already. Of course not, Corksall agreed, his neural pathways pulsing with amusement. That would be breaking the most important rule of education, which is, never let your students know exactly how much they've taught you. As if hearing them, Jackson looked up at the observation window and gave a casual salute that bordered on insubordinate. Vz'taar found himself returning the gesture before he could stop himself. Yes, humans were certainly changing the academy, and perhaps the galaxy itself, in ways no one had anticipated. Whether that change would ultimately prove beneficial remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. Whenever someone declared a situation impossible, hopeless, or beyond salvation, all eyes would inevitably turn to the Deathworlders, because every species in the galaxy had now learned the same lesson. When survival seemed impossible, you wanted a human on your side. They had evolved on a planet that had tried to kill them for millions of years. They had not merely survived, they had thrived, turning threats into opportunities, dangers into challenges, and problems into puzzles to be solved. And now, they were teaching others to do the same. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps, Vz'taar reflected as he watched the cadets work together below, that might not be such a terrible thing after all.